Home intrusion happened right under my roommate's nose while I was at work. I came home from work today to receive some very unsettling news from one of my roommates. It started when I went to let the dogs out into the backyard. Our back door is in the kitchen, so on my way to let them out, I passed by the oven and noticed that it was on. It surprised me a bit because my roommate Mandy was the only other person home, and she had been spending most of her time in her room due to feeling ill. Even so, I figured that I'd better ask her first before turning it off, just in case she was actually using the oven. I went to the end of the hallway where her room was, knocked on her door, and asked, "Hey, is the oven supposed to be on? Like, are you using it right now?" Confusion and concern was immediately apparent in her face as she replied, "What? No, I haven't even been out in the kitchen today." I shared her confusion and concern upon hearing this, but then pondered the possibility that Carl, her brother, and our other roommate had been the one to leave it on by mistake. I asked her if this could be the case, and she told me that Carl was still at work, and he had been since early that morning. This was when she and I began to piece together that something very strange had to have happened. I told her that I had just gotten home a few minutes prior. It was a little after 3 a.m. at that point, and I had left the house at about 7:30 in the morning. She then informed me with horrific realization that at around 11 a.m., she had heard noises coming from the living room, including a woman's voice, a chair moving, and the front door opening. She didn't realize at the time that I was at work, so she just assumed it was me and I didn't think much of it. She then mentioned that in hindsight though, the dogs were barking an unusual amount during this time. I asked her how long the noises coming from the living room went on, and she said that it was hard to tell because she was trying to sleep at the time, but if she had to guess, they lasted about 20 minutes. Mandy, Carl, and myself are the only current residents of this home. And as mentioned before, Carl and I were both at work during that time frame, so Mandy was the only person who reasonably should have been in the house. I thanked her for informing me of this and then went back to the front half of the house and did a quick comb of the area to check for anything else that looked out of place or missing. I didn't discover anything else out of the ordinary, and as of the time of this posting, February 15th, 2022, nothing else has come of it. Update. February 17th, 2022. Pretty minor, but still pretty weird. I went to the hall closet to get more toilet paper from a bathroom, and I noticed an empty wrapper or packaging for a new pillow in there. I didn't buy a new pillow recently, so I asked both of my roommates if they did. Mandy told me that she bought a new pillow about a month ago, but she threw the packaging away. This is my first time noticing the packaging in that hall closet, and I last went into the hall closet just a couple weeks ago, if I remember correctly. Update. March 4th, 2022. New information and events have emerged that are almost certainly connected to this incident. Late last night, I woke up from a nap to find that Mandy and Carl were seemingly angry about something. They were initially in the living room, but then stormed back into Mandy's room immediately after I walked in, and I just heard pounding and cursing. I inferred from this that they were angry at me and started wondering about the possible reason. In any case, a few minutes later, Carl walked out to the living room where I was and told me, "Don't worry, we're not angry at you," and then returned to Mandy's room and said, "I have something very important to tell you," before he entered it. Flash forward another short while later, and the two of them walk back into the living room, looking like they have something to talk to me about. They inform me that a source close to them has recently confirmed that there has indeed been someone who's been standing outside the house and watching our home at odd hours. They've yet to directly catch them in the act, but they can tell it's happening based on hearing noises and the reaction from our dogs. There had been a few more strange instances in the past few days leading up to this. First, when I woke up from an after-work nap one night, I went into the living room to find that all the lights had been unplugged and the bulbs loosened. I also found that the lock on the door leading out to the garage had been jammed. Then, a little while later, while I was in the kitchen making dinner, I found that the microwave and the toaster were both unplugged. The lights being unplugged thankfully turned out to have an innocent explanation. That was just Carl trying to save on the electric bill. But when I asked him about the microwave and toaster oven, he had no idea. He said he didn't do that, and he doesn't think Mandy did either. He tried to reason that they might have become unplugged by accident, but frankly, I very much doubt that. The part of the wall where they're plugged in is at a little corner that gets virtually no hand traffic, so to speak. On top of that, the microwave plug is thick and sturdy. Certainly not the type to accidentally come unplugged just from someone bumping it with their hand. So, with all that considered, the idea that they could have come unplugged by accident simply wasn't plausible. As for the lock on the door to the garage being jammed, that had the creepiest explanation of all. I had forgotten to ask about it the last time that I was asking about the other stuff being unplugged, but they ended up bringing it up last night when they were filling me in on everything else. They told me that they had found the door out in the garage that leads to the backyard unlocked. None of us have used that door in months, so someone had undoubtedly picked the lock on that door and gotten into the garage, at the very least. Their discovery to this led them to take the extra precaution of double locking the door that leads to the garage from indoors. Mandy also brought up to me an extra chilling detail about the previous incident that she had forgotten to mention until then. You may recall that one of the sounds she heard coming from the living room was a woman's voice. Well, she informed me that the voice she heard sounded a lot like mine, and on top of that, it sounded muffled, as though it was coming from a recording. This means that there is a very real possibility, even likelihood, that whoever was behind this had somehow obtained a recording of my voice and was purposely using it to make it seem as though I was the one in the living room at the time. They even seemed to have an idea about who it was, but remained vague about that, presumably not wanting to jump to any conclusions. I was able to gather that they definitely believe it to be a man, though. However, upon further discussion, we came to the conclusion that there are likely multiple people involved. A theory we all had to varying degrees was that Carl's ex, Ashley, is behind this in some way. She and Carl had a very nasty breakup last summer, and she's displayed unhinged behavior towards him and Mandy ever since, including breaking in on 2 separate occasions. After the second time, Carl finally got a protective order against her, but that hasn't stopped her from seemingly trying to get around it. She hasn't directly shown up during times that we're home, but she has been texting both of them from unknown numbers off and on a few times, and even managed to hack their Facebook accounts just a couple months ago. On top of all that, Carl has confirmed that Ashley does indeed know how to pick locks. I also noticed and point out that all the major incidents seem to be occurring during times I'm not home, and brought up the suggestion that this could be deliberate. One of my friends who I had described the situation to had said that if this person is indeed deliberately carrying out their acts when I, specifically, am not home, it likely indicates that their vendetta is only against Mandy and Carl, and they do not want me involved in the crossfires. That lends credence to the theory of Ashley being involved, For all her anger and erratic behavior towards Mandy and Carl, she never had a single negative interaction with me personally. She showed fondness for me, and we parted ways without any hard feelings after Carl ended things. When I explained all this to Mandy and Carl, they found that it made a lot of sense. As for the reason we believe there are multiple people involved, as previously mentioned, the person who's been the main one watching our house seems to be a man, but the one actually picking the locks and entering is most likely Ashley herself, or maybe one of her female friends, since they would have light enough tread to more effectively slip in and out secretly. A lot of this is still speculation, but given all the circumstantial evidence, I have a feeling we're not far off with our intuition of what's happening.